Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Frames for Thought podcast. My name is Alex the Animator, and with me as always is...
Mark the Actor.
And welcome. Today we're going to be talking about influence. What sort of things influenced us as kids and brought us on this journey to get where we are today? What sort of things influence us now as professionals? Sit back, relax. Here we go. For me, it started with Thundercats. The mighty hero ensemble of the 1980s. Rankin Bass could do no wrong. Silverhawks, basically Thundercats in space.
So alien Thundercats in space.
More or less. They were birds instead of cats in this one.
Oh, what, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Silverhawks and then Thundercats. One was on the ground and one was very much in space.
Very cool. So what exactly about it specifically did you gravitate to?
It was always the hero ensemble. Even though I wasn't a huge fan of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, I always liked the team.
Mm-hmm.
So with Thundercats, I enjoyed the variety. Everybody had a specialty. In Silverhawks, everybody had a specialty. Even in He-Man, that's true. Power Rangers, even, that's true in some regard, right? They all had a different animal, or the Rangers all used different weapons. But it was always some sort of hero ensemble that I was always attracted to. Even thinking about the Avengers, right? They're all kind of different. They fall into that hero ensemble. They work together as a team, and they were always awesome. They looked awesome. And to, 5-year-old me, that was like, yes, I am those people.
So yeah, okay, you like the hero ensemble stuff. That's really cool. So specifically when it comes to like animation versus like a live action hero ensemble, like what was the difference for you that really kind of stood out? Like you mentioned Power Rangers before. Is there like a big difference between Thundercats and Power Rangers that really drove you to Thundercats over Power Rangers?
In a lot of ways, it's the fantasy element to it all. A huge fan of high fantasy. I read a lot of books, and one of my favorites is The Rune Lords. And if you haven't read it and you're looking for something that's got a well-defined, well-established magic system and a history and a lore and all that, you can check it out. But high fantasy, so Thundercats falling into that kind of category where they're these alien cat people from a different planet, fighting mummies on Earth. There's a high fantasy element to that doesn't exist with Iron Man fighting your everyday crony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. I can see it's a nice... Thundercats has that kind of nice mixture between like fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, there's a nice healthy mix there. And the intro theme song, like it really, even if you're not a fan of the show itself, there's something to be said about that intro that will just get you hyped up, even now as an over 30-year-old adult.
I'm the same when it comes to theme songs with the Power Ranger theme song.
Yeah, that one's great.
Yeah, the moment the guitar just starts riffing, I just get right into it and I just become a kid again.
Oh man, they nailed it. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like the early 90s, they nailed it.
And I mean, I recently watched a video of all the Power Ranger theme songs, and the first like 5 or 6 series of the show all has that theme song. They just changed, like, instead of like Go Go Power Rangers, like Go Go Space Rangers. Like that's all
nice.
That's all they change.
Oh man, one of my staples on YouTube is like the top 50 theme songs from the 1980s or something like that.
Yeah,
I love those.
That stuff is really fun. When it comes to me and my acting world, I kind of sat back and I kind of thought, like, what was it that first really stood out to me as an influence to make me want to be an actor? And the one name just kind of kept popping up in my head, and that's the late, great Chris Farley. Mm-hmm. He's just this giant, lovable ball of energy.
Larger than life, man.
Oh, 100% he was. And for me, sort of what I got from it is that you have this guy who is doing things that a guy his size shouldn't be doing. He puts his entire heart into everything he does. Like, he's very famous for his comedy, right? By all rights, he should be. He's one of the funniest people who ever walked the face of the planet. But what a lot of people don't really talk about as much, and maybe this is because I spent a lot of time watching him or because I kind of identify with him as much as I do, is that his very sentimental, down to earth scenes in a lot of his movies, like I'm thinking Tommy Boy.
Right when he's on the boat.
Yeah, he's on the boat talking to his father, and it's so earnest, it's so real, it's so down to earth. And so there was so much more to this guy than just like fat guy fall down. And I really appreciate that level that he's able to go from one extreme to just a very grounded, beautiful performance in the same movie. It's really nice to see, and it's believable. You can have a lot of like comedy movies where your main actor does all the goofy silly stuff and then they try to do the sentimental stuff and the sentimental stuff just falls apart because they're really just funny. They're not as grounded.
Did you find that you were associating with him more as a teenager or even before that? Because I remember early on you said one of your, like, what made you perform in front of your mom and her friends was Elvis early on.
Yeah, see, I went specifically with acting, which is why it's Chris Farley, because Chris Farley is the first one that kind of pops out.
Sure.
You could argue that maybe Jim Carrey as well, because I remember really being in love with The Mask and the idea of this man becoming a cartoon character. It's definitely, Chris Farley is definitely the foundation for me to want to be a performer. Like, pretending to be Elvis in front of my mom and her friends, that was like a hint of it, but it wasn't enough for me to really say like, oh, there's a place for me in the acting world. There's something I can do here. And I mean, I was a very goofy kid. If you remember, I was always kind of like joking and like overly silly and like not very serious. And so being like the kind of bigger kid who's not very serious, Chris Farley was kind of like a natural fit for me as like a role model.
Right, he kind of became emblematic for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I identified a lot with him. He had such a great mind when it came to who he was, which is something that took me as an actor a long time to figure out. Like I remember watching his documentary, there's a part of it when he's talking about going to college. And he's signing up for all of his acting classes in college, and he decides to take ballet. Like when you hear that, you're like, well, why the hell would he take ballet? And it's because he thought it would be funny. If you watch a lot of his SNL stuff, he's always doing like pirouettes and spins. And it's like he never, like the ballet never left him because he knew like it's funny to see me do this because he knew who he was, he knew what he looked like, and he knew his energy. And so it's, as an adult, I appreciate him a lot more because I just see that like the amount of work that went into everything he does. And
Right.
I really do think he's an unsung hero for performers.
And famous for the cartwheel.
Yeah, the guy's like 400 pounds and he does a cartwheel. It's amazing. And so I couldn't talk about influences without bringing up Chris Farley. I think he's just a solid foundation of who I am as a performer and what I would like to do as a performer, especially in the world of comedy.
Yeah, I think that's awesome because I loved watching Chris Farley growing up. Like his characters were just so, they were larger than life. Yeah. And when he played opposite David Spade, like it was just classically funny.
It's perfect. And even with Adam Sandler, when he's doing stuff with Adam Sandler, like he's just like those three together were hysterical. It was a great combination. One Saturday Night Live bit that I always remember, and this has like nothing to do with his size. It's literally just how he's able to deliver a line. And it's a news report about a tornado called El Nino, and he's playing the part of El Nino. And so he's wearing like Spanish dancer things on his arms.
Yeah, I can see them.
Yeah. And then he just like spins it and he goes, I am El Nino, Spanish for the Nino. And it's just like the funniest thing. And I can't understand why I love it so much, but it's just like the timing of it just works. His commitment to the bit just works. I really think if you're an actor who wants to get into comedy, definitely he's one of the people you should look up. He's 1,000% committed to whatever it is that he's doing, and that's why he's so funny.
Do you think that the influence of Chris Farley is lasting? Are you still influenced by Chris Farley, or have you kind of moved into like a new direction? I imagine that you're not aspiring to be Chris Farley, but you're using that larger than life mentality that he brought to the stage and the commitment to the bit. But what else is influencing you when you get in front of that camera or on that stage? Like how are you driving yourself in that regard?
So when it comes to me, Chris Farley's still in there, but he's not as big of an influence as he used to be. Because originally my thought process was I was going to be a big time comedic stage actor. That was sort of the original thought when I was a kid. So that was why Chris Farley was such a big influence on that, because he was the kind of funny onstage man I wanted to be. As I've gotten older and I've studied the craft more, the part of Chris Farley that stays more with me is the groundedness of his more serious scenes. Now, if I was to go into comedy, or like go full on into comedy, because I still do comedy from time to time, Chris Farley would be the one that I would first jump to. He would still first influence me there. But it's definitely more his grounded work that sticks with me over time. Because a lot of the stuff that I audition for, a lot of the stuff that I do, tends to be more down to earth, grounded, realistic stuff. And so finding that honesty and that commitment that Chris Farley has is what I take in from Chris Farley into any kind of script I get now.
Right. So anything else beyond Chris Farley influencing you currently, now that you're what we would consider professional?
Actor wise, the other big one that I would say is Philip Seymour Hoffman. Philip Seymour Hoffman is again someone who I think less so than Chris Farley, but is definitely again someone who is underrated. Philip Seymour Hoffman makes any movie he's in that much better. He's extremely talented. He's extremely vulnerable on camera. And much like Chris Farley, he's grounded, he's realistic. And I feel that for me, especially where I'm at in my acting world, I'm not the top of choices. I'm still getting a lot of those quote-unquote bit parts that I auditioned for. One-liners, two-liners, one scene, those kind of things. Philip Seymour Hoffman was still doing those types of parts well into his career, and the respect and the work that he puts into those smaller parts really make him stand out. Two of them that pop into my head right now, The Big Lebowski. He only has 3 or 4 scenes in that one, and he's just playing like a snivelly little rat henchman to The Big Lebowski. When he's in front of the camera, he really just steals it through his level of professionalism and his believability. The other one that kind of pops into my head, and I feel he completely steals this movie entirely, is Boogie Nights. He plays... So for those uninitiated, Boogie Nights is about the adult film industry, and it's sort of talking about it. And he plays a behind-the-camera person who's also homosexual and is in love with Dirk Diggler, who's the star. And so the entire time he's fighting his feelings for him. Again, it's so believable, and it's so honest, and it's like, it's raw. And you just watch it, and your heart goes out to him. Like, you laugh at him too, because there's like some really hilarious things that he does. But there's this particular scene when he's in the car with him, and it just breaks your heart to see that rejection on his face, and it just feels so real, and his whole world just gets crushed in that one instance. And it's just so hard to explain it. Like, it's something you really should watch.
It sounds a lot like commitment again, right? Like, when even if Philip Seymour Hoffman gets a small part, he's still committed to that part, and he puts dedication into the role. And the same with Chris Farley. There's a commitment to the bit, commitment to the part.
Yeah. So when I get like my one-liner, two-liner bartender or hunter or whatever it is, I think about Philip Seymour Hoffman and like how much work he would put into it to make it stand out, to make it lasting.
Almost like you want to channel the power.
I feel it's kind of morbid because like my 2 favorite guys are both dead.
That's not necessarily morbid. Lots of people draw influence from people who aren't around anymore.
Yeah, that's true. I just noticed right now.
It's harder for me to list off specific animators because there are so many animation sequences that are iconic that you look at that are like, wow, that's so cool, and have such really cool narrative and storytelling. And there are so many hands that touch animation that it's hard to pin down just any which one. Mm-hmm. And so when we talked about me in the second episode in the animation industry, I mentioned Glenn Keane and how he helped create characters like the Beast and Ariel, and how he, was in charge of the animation on Tarzan and all of the really, really cool things that he's done since then. But what makes him such an influence is the way he animates. He draws and animates with force. When Tarzan is, doing his big moves, when he's lifting the jaguar, when he's fighting gorillas and climbing trees and doing the sliding on the vines and the branches, like there's a rhythm and emotion to it, like it feels right. It has a good feeling to it, the way it flows. There's energy behind it. And he's not the only person to have touched Tarzan. definitely a principal animator on Tarzan, and I think he was the director of Tarzan, or at least the animation director on Tarzan. It's again like he's committed to this craft, right? And the reason that he was so good is because of the effort and the time that he put into it, right? And so that usually is enough to lift up an animator and be like, yes, this person, I want to aspire to be this person. He has some influence, I feel, on almost any animator that's coming into the business, because it's very hard to talk to any animator and be like, so you've never seen The Little Mermaid, or you've never watched Beauty and the Beast, you've never watched Pocahontas or Aladdin, or even Eric Goldberg, who was the animator on Genie in Aladdin in the early 90s. He did all the animation for the tattoos on Maui in Moana. So, I mean, these guys are still around and they're still doing work. They're still cranking it out, and they're, like they're becoming the wise old men of the industry again, and it's amazing to see what they do. And even as a professional, when I was a student, I was influenced by Glenn Keane, and now as a professional still, even more so because of the amount of work that I have to put into my own work, and then the amount of work that I have to put into my own side projects, creative endeavors, and all that. Right? He plays a major role in that. So if I had to pin it down onto an animator, I'd probably say him, but I can't really say because there are other projects that I watch that I love, and I love the animation. Again, we talked about it before, but the Etano Circus, anytime that somebody goes and does those crazy camera moves where the characters are moving through space and dodging missiles or whatever, like that in and of itself is like a special art in animation. And there's that new show on Amazon Prime, Invincible. It's about superheroes, but there's even an episode in there where they do an Etano Circus type thing, and I won't spoil it because it's so good. But there's one episode where they are doing like an Etano Circus style combat sequence, and it's really really cool. But yeah, I mean, even the Road to El Dorado, right? That the DreamWorks movie with Miguel and Tulio, like their chemistry is amazing, and on screen it's amazing, and it's animated to be like this really cool relationship, and you fall in love with these characters. So as an animator, you're like, yes, that bit of narrative storytelling is really good, or the way that they're faking this duel or hiding in a pickle barrel or something like that. Like there's all kinds of moments in animation where you're like, that is really cool. Yeah. So I mean, with you, Chris Farley and Philip Seymour Hoffman, their commitment to the role and dedication to their scenes, their character, and so on, right? They bring a presence to the show or the role or the movie, the skit, whatever that they're in. And it's the same with animators in certain animation sequences, or those sorts of things where it's like, yeah, that was a really good storytelling moment, and that was really powerful.
So I have a question for you though. Now that you're in like more into the industry, that you're at the level that you're at now, does that give you more of an appreciation for these influencers just because you understand how hard it is now, or is it just something that keeps you going to get to their level? Like, what exactly changes once you get into the industry?
Well, it's hard to think that, even from your perspective, I'm sure it's hard to think that you'll get to that point at some point until somebody points it out, and then you think about it and you go, nah, I'm not that good. And you're constantly building yourself up. I would say, more respect and admiration for them. I wouldn't say that they're constantly influencing the way I think about animation anymore, but there's a real respect there for what they've done and how they've gotten there. And it's so well documented because once you hit that point of superstardom in the industry, right? People are talking to you, and you're doing interviews, and you're doing reviews at colleges, or you're doing consultant work and this and that. So I mean, Glenn Keane has been talked to about animation probably to death. He's probably happy to keep animating but not give presentations on it. But his daughter, however, Claire, has followed in his footsteps and was actually the art director on Tangled. She also does a lot of children's books, but I'm diverging here. There's a real admiration for them, and you sometimes find yourself thinking back to your school days. Like some days you'll just have a brain fart. You'll be working, you'll be like, what was it I was supposed to be doing? Like there'll be some days when I'm supposed to be animating some kind of walk or a run, and I'll be getting started and I'll be about halfway through on the passing pose, and I'll be like, is that even right? I'll have to think about it. and then my brain will turn back on and it'll be like, oh yeah, okay, here we go. But you just have those moments where it's just like, I mean, yeah, there's a real respect and admiration there, but I wouldn't say that they're influencing my every thought about animation anymore. Now a lot of my influence comes from the people around me. So working in video games now, it's very different because when I was working in film and television, people who were sitting around me were other animators. And so sometimes you could look over and see what they were working on and be like, whoa, that's really cool. Or sometimes you could mentor somebody else who's sitting beside you, or even they could mentor you, give you tips. They'll see what you're working on and they'll be like, that flip isn't really quite what it needs to be. Maybe if you change the pose here and like switch the timing there. You get a lot of constructive feedback, and that to me, the team dynamic and the honest feedback that you get from a strong team is more influential. So with video games now, I sit next to a TD, character artists and texture and modelers and that sort of thing. And it's the same. They'll tap me on the shoulder and be like, Alex, what do you think of this texture on this weapon? Or Alex, your retreat animation isn't working. Like it's not cycling properly. And so, then we have these honest moments of feedback and constructive criticism. It helps me to amp up my animation, but it also helps them to ramp up whatever it is that they're working on if I'm able to give them constructive feedback in any which way. And so that to me is more influential now because we're all about, at least on the team that I'm working on now, we're all about developing the strength of the team. We want people to be better. We don't necessarily want more people on the team. That would be great, but we don't just want numbers. We want people who are strong. We want people who can help lift up the team, help carry the project. That to me is what influences me and kind of keeps me going right now, is all of the honest feedback that I get from other people.
That's awesome. And it's very similar in acting too, where a lot of times as when you're first entering the business, if you're doing stage stuff more specifically, if you're teamed up with somebody who's been doing it for years and you have a scene with them, you'll lock eyes. And once you start playing together in rehearsals, then they become what you're talking about now, where it's sort of like your peer influence. Like you're working together and you're going off of each other, and then there's like advice where like, oh hey, if you actually wait a beat before you say that, it's gonna blah blah blah, and you kind of just play off of each other and you just make the scene work. And then like that person at that time becomes your influence on this show, and it's inspirational, and I feel like it's how the industry everywhere in the creative field should be working. It shouldn't be about holding people down. It should be about influencing everyone to come up and go higher and higher and higher and higher and higher till you get this superstardom for everybody.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, how good can you actually be if people are always just patting your ass? You know what I mean?
I think you're terrible.
People are just...
I think you become lazy, and I think you become terrible. Like that's...
Yeah, you become what I think the word is affluent.
Yeah.
But do you remember, okay, this is a bit of a deep dive, like kind of deep cut into our past, but when we were in high school, we had a professional acting troupe come in to do the show that shall not be named.
The Scottish play
with us.
for those.
The Scottish play. Yeah. And I remember I had some lines to deliver, and I delivered my lines, but these pros, we made eye contact, like you say, and there was an energy in their eyes that I hadn't seen in like other students, right? Because we're students and these are pros. And so there was an energy in their eyes that immediately was like, it had me like freeze up for a second, because I was like, whoa, what's that? It was a strange power. And then, it elevated the performance because it like energized you in a way to deliver the line differently. That's just me. I have that one recollection of like locking eyes with a professional at one point and just being like, whoa, like that's different.
Yeah, that's the play I'm talking about. Like that's again, once you start acting, you're going to start picking this stuff up when you're in your classes or you're on the stage, where it's everything changes once you start making eye contact and you start really truly listening to each other. And that's like the hardest thing for an actor to kind of learn, is listening, because you get the lines, you know what you're supposed to say and when you're supposed to say it. So a lot of times your brain just turns off. But when you're making that eye contact, when you're breathing together, when you're actually legitimately listening to them, that's when the magic happens. That's when it gets grounded. That's when it gets real. And that's when it's entertaining to watch.
And those long pauses sometimes, like sometimes there needs to be that long pause.
Yeah, it's all part of the show. It's something I want to talk about too while we're talking about it, because right now during this COVID BS, there's a lot of downtime for actors. I was actually talking to my agent recently because I accidentally shaved off my beard, and I had to tell her like, hey, you have to use my clean shaving shots for now because I'm beardless. She was like, yeah, no problem, but it's dead right now anyways, so you'll probably have a beard back by the time it picks back up.
Oof, sign of the times, I guess.
Well, I mean, the acting industry, especially in film, it's up and down. You'll have a lot of auditions and a lot of work, and then you'll have nothing. That's just how it goes. But that being said, when I'm not doing the acting stuff, I gotta keep myself going creatively. And so I want to talk about my influences when it comes to writing, because that's sort of the next thing I really like to do, is to write my own stories.
Are we talking short stories? Are we talking screenplays? What are we talking?
Both. I like writing. I like writing screenplays. I have trouble finishing them because the format is really hard for me to get through. But I do like writing plays and screenplays. But I also really enjoy writing short stories. I've always enjoyed writing short stories as well.
Because you like horror movies so much,
Oh,
do you find that you
that's where I was getting at.
Okay, hang on. Let me just take it back.
So one of my big influences is going to be the show Tales from the Crypt. And it's an old HBO show it's all horror based, and it's based on the old comic book line Tales from the Crypt and what's the other?
Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
Tales from the Crypt and Creep Show.
The children's version of freaky stories. It happened to a friend of a friend of mine.
Oh no, these Tales from the Crypt I'm talking about is the HBO one, which is the adult version.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. There was like the animatronic puppet that was a Crypt Keeper, right? Yeah.
So the reason why that show in particular is because, and this is why I like horror in general, is because it takes something like mundane and ordinary and then completely flips it on its head.
Just before you get rolling, it's exactly why I like high fantasy. It helps me get out of the real world.
Yeah.
I like to escape. That's why I don't really find myself reading a lot of nonfiction. Mm-hmm. It's because when I read something or I create something or I want to watch a movie or something, I want to get away. Okay, back to you.
I mean, I completely agree. I completely agree with you. I think that's the reason why entertainment exists, is so we don't have to think about what's going on right now. And I think that's why you see such a pushback about a lot of changes being made right now. But with horror, it's like I said, you take something normal, you spin it on its head. You have people go camping, and then all of a sudden there's danger out in the woods. How do these people react? How do they blah, blah, blah? Tales from the Crypt in particular looked at a lot of things like karma, hubris, and that's what I really enjoy about a good horror story. It's not about a slasher popping out of the woods and killing naked teens. It's about a personality type getting their comeuppance. Comeuppance?
Comeuppance.
I can't say it.
Comeuppance.
It's about a...
Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Believe in yourself.
It's about a specific personality type getting its comeuppance.
Let's just call it muffins.
Let's call it muffins. It's about a specific personality type getting its muffins.
Yeah, there we go. Just desserts.
I mean, like, okay, here's a quick thing to other actors. If you have trouble speaking, doesn't mean you can't be an actor. I just proved it. The other big writing influence for me is from the more comedic realm, and for me, that show is South Park. Trey Parker and Matt Stone. I love that show. I've loved that show since I can remember that show being on TV, and it's fun to see the evolution of it from its first season to where it is now, because it's a completely different show. But what I enjoy about it is that at the very beginning, it was very potty humor, quick jokes. That's all it was. But then as it got older and older and older, it started taking influences from stuff that was going on now.
Yeah, pop culture.
A lot of pop culture, politics, and everything. And they're able to still keep their poo-poo humor, but keep it relevant to what they're doing. And they're really good at showing both sides of an argument. They don't really take a side, and they just show you both of them, and they kind of just pick which one's a bit more ridiculous to focus on. But they'll show you both sides and show you that both of them are kind of stupid, and you had to make your own kind of decisions and just be good people, essentially.
But they really, really push it like right to the brink.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know? They do things that if they weren't South Park, you would not be able to do them. Oh yeah, they do some bad things. But I kind of love that though, because again, it kind of goes back to the horror of like the pushing of the envelope, turning everything on its head. It's that extremeness that they go all the way there, they touch it, and then they come all the way back. And I think that that's really enjoyable for an audience, especially for a quick 20-minute episode. It's really fun. And then even in their bigger projects like Team America, that tackles so much stuff. And I love how it just touches everything and just kind of goes on and on and on. And they still have their stupid jokes in between everything. But then it's like the whole concept of that movie is America doesn't need to police the world. That's the whole concept of it. And they turn it into a really bad action movie. And that's what makes it so much fun, is because you understand the politics behind it as well as all the stupid jokes they're making.
But in the classic format of the Thunderbirds.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really aggressive, inappropriate Thunderbirds. So I would say that those are like really big influences to me. And so, I mean, when I do my writing, I always sort of think about, from horror, I take the character aspect. So even if I'm writing like a romance, I really concentrate on who my characters are, what they do, and what they deserve and what they don't deserve. What I get from South Park is just sort of that commitment to the absurd and just going with it. Just go with whatever you're planning out. If you're writing a romance movie about an airport and people call it connected flights, and it's about these two pilots who are in love and they're always like mismatching each other or whatever, as long as you commit to that concept as much as South Park does, it can work. You can make it work.
Yeah, it's that thing we were talking about before where my old instructor, his advice was to finish your thought.
Yeah. That's a perfect example. That's exactly it. Finish your thought. Yeah, that's perfect. Is there any other kind of influences for you for your animation or your drawing style, maybe?
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of like the monthly drawing challenges. So we just recently completed the March of Robots, and that was pretty fun. We just did that internal. I'm not really active on social media, if anybody's wondering. I don't have an Instagram or a Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. I just find that when I did have an Instagram and I was posting my art there, I was creating art for the likes instead of making art that I like. Mm-hmm. And so I just stopped it altogether. And now anytime that I draw stuff in my sketchbook, I just kind of share it with my friends or whatever. I don't really have an online presence. But when we're talking about drawing, yes, I do draw influence from other artists. I really dig. So this kind of just shows my colors here. It's like I really dig fantasy artists. A lot of the artists that work for Wizards of the Coast, for example, people who do the Magic the Gathering card art, or the people who can paint to make their paintings look like a classical, more Renaissance-y type painting, but it's like a giant, and those types of things. I like it when it has a good amount, like a healthy portion of imagination and whimsy. So it's people who are, again, committing to the idea, right? If there's somebody who lives in a mushroom house, it's probably not going to be a Smurf. It's going to be something completely different. I really like it when people go the extra mile to create something that's truly unique. Gravity Falls is a really good example. Or if we're talking about Hilda, there's all of the creatures in that populate that world that have a lot of whimsy. Or if we're going to go into the Miyazaki realm, think about Spirited Away and all of the creatures that Chihiro encounters, like the river spirit or the radish spirit, even the one that's like she meets in the elevator right away. And then even Howl's Moving Castle with Calcifer, the fire sprite, right? Like there's so much, right? But it's all just imaginative, and I love that about it. If you haven't read Discworld by Terry Pratchett, I highly recommend it. The idea that their entire world is on a disc that's on the backs of elephants, and these elephants are on the back of a giant galactic turtle, right? Like that's incredibly imaginative and full of whimsy, and they go on these like expeditions where they go off the edge of the world in these vessels that are on like pulleys, and there's so much to it. But all of that I take in helps to influence the way that I like to create my characters. I really like the retro futuristic look.
Like 1950s futurism, or
like 1970s futurism, like the world of tomorrow, and like Blade Runner has that dystopian feel to it. The one I'm talking about, the Harrison Ford one. And Star Wars does this really good, but I really like the idea that the future is old. That was one of the grounding ideas in Star Wars, is that this happened a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But it's old. The future is old. All of this stuff, this technology, it's been around for a long time. It's not new. It's rusted. It's broken. It's falling apart. It's like, I love the character of that stuff. I'm not a big fan of things that look so shiny and new, like RoboCop.
RoboCop looks pretty gross in some areas of Detroit, though. They have like a whole like radiation plant.
Sure, but what I'm talking about RoboCop himself,
Oh, I gotcha,
right?
okay,
Like
okay.
he's the pristine metal man. Even Dredd, Judge Dredd, you know, it feels old in a way.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. I
You know?
agree with that.
It's
I agree
grungy.
with that.
It's dirty. It's not shiny, not in any which way.
So on the topic of like the fantasy creating, like influencing you to kind of create, I have that too when I watch some specific movies. So like the most recent one that I watched that made me think like this was, there's this trilogy of B movies, and they're not amazing, but I think they're very creative, and I think that's what I gravitate to them. It's called Basket Case, and the idea of it is that this boy was born with a Siamese twin that didn't develop properly, and it just became like a ball of flesh, and they end up like cutting it off, and they go crazy and kill the doctors who did it, and then the trilogies just do different things. But in the second one, they go to this home of like disfigured people, or like a quote unquote home for freaks, and just seeing that and all the different characters that they created based on this world, really like, I started watching it and I was thinking like, could you continue these characters in like a comic book, like a short run graphic novel series? And I was sort of coming up with ideas that might be interesting to kind of explore with it, just because the director and the writer and the producer and everyone behind it just created all these really interesting standout ideas that just kind of influenced my brain to think more of like, okay, what can be done? What could you do with this world? And again, that's just like how influence, like a really bad movie can kind of influence you into an entirely different world of like what of possibilities. Another one in the more fantasy world that you were talking about, and this is an animated one as well. I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but The Last Unicorn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most beautiful looking movies out there. Like the wave of unicorns, like from the ocean, and then like the Minotaur and his like fire as he moves, like
The Red
the
Bull.
Red Bull. That's what it was. Yeah, they called him a Minotaur. I think it just looks so beautiful, and it just looks like a painting that flows, and it looks like it looks like you're just watching a painting move, and it's just so beautiful.
The Last Unicorn, it has a lot of really pretty imagery, but from an animation perspective, it hasn't aged all that well. It's classic, probably timeless, you know. People like you and me could watch it. I could probably watch it with my kids and they would probably really enjoy it, but there will come a time when people they'll get older and they'll say, "Oh, you know, like those drawings are moving a lot, they're boiling a lot, they're changing a lot." And it's just because of the way that animation was done. You know, like the amount of money that goes into a project, what you can afford, what you're budgeted for, and how important is this scene versus that scene, and you know, like what the timelines and everything. So there's a lot of factors that play into it. But similarly to, like, I think in the same line of thought as The Last Unicorn, you might think of like Little Nemo in Slumberland.
Yeah,
Right? Like that one was really good.
that's a nice looking one too.
And the idea that the nightmare is what they had kept locked up, right?
Yeah.
And it's the nightmare that escapes. So I mean that brings a certain level of imagination right there, right? You're in Slumberland or Dreamland, and everything is very dreamlike. But then the nightmare comes and ruins everything and makes it all scary and spooky.
So I think what we're kind of coming to right now is when it comes to the creation aspect, like the drawing or the writing, it's really about what just kind of sparks your imagination that kind of influences you.
For sure. Yeah, what gets your creative juices flowing?
Yeah.
You know, and for some people that's going to be something totally different, right? Like they have they want to watch biopics or biopics, right? More things that are more grounded in reality, the nonfiction type stuff, and that's gonna inspire them, like true crime. That's gonna get them going. But for me and for you, like we said, it's like I need to get away. I want to go somewhere else. Take me somewhere new.
Well, I mean, like Star Wars is highly influenced by World War II. Like that's a high influence on it. Like all the spaceship battles and all the designs, that's all based on like World War II fighters. The Millennium Falcon, where Luke's sitting in that chair and he's like swiveling around shooting, that's a World War II plane. That's a fighter plane.
Another really interesting thing is, again, this goes to commitment, is the decision early on when they were creating Star Wars to keep sound in space.
Yeah.
That went a long way. Can you imagine watching Star Wars but press mute anytime that they're in space?
Oh, it'd be unwatchable.
It would be so different, right? And that was a creative choice that paid dividends.
And then another thing with me, when I get an audition and I have to come up with a character for the audition, a big thing that helps me is music. If I can find a song that fits with the character I want to bring into it, I'll listen to it a bunch of times before I get into the room.
Get you into the headspace.
Yeah, exactly. And I get this like understanding because like again, I get a lot of big tough guy kind of characters, and so having that kind of musical influence gets me really in the mood because generally I'm a pretty like down to earth, nice, easygoing kind of guy. So to get to my point where I have to be aggressive and more alpha male type, I guess, I need that kind of musical influence playing in the back of my mind to kind of just help me, push me to get me to where I need to be. Actually, another big one for people I know in the acting world is what your character is wearing will influence your choices. So if your character wears a specific type of shoe, how do they move differently? If they have glasses, how do they see the world differently? Anything like that. Well, whatever can kind of help you build your character and kind of influence you to go on, do it up.
Yeah, and I'll kind of piggyback on that a bit. When I'm working on my own creative projects, I like to listen to things like synthwave, where I'm listening to things like the Midnight or FM 84. When I'm working at work and I'm animating, and whether it was Lego or it's video games now, working in militaristic shooters, I can't listen to that because it doesn't get me in the right headspace. But neither would listening to like hardcore metal or anything like that. So what I find I gravitate to, just because it helps keep me chill and focused, is smooth jazz. So I listen to a lot of smooth jazz during the day, but then when I'm working on my own creative endeavors, it's like I crank up the midnight.
Yeah, see, specifically me, when I'm creating characters, it's like wrestling theme songs. They're already designed to give you the feeling or the impression of the character that's walking down to the ring, right? So it's already your kind of first step. And so you can kind of listen to some of that stuff and be like, okay, this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it. Oh, this is close. And you can kind of listen to it for a bit and be like, okay, it's almost there. Like, what kind of sounds like this that I already know? And then you can find other music from there.
Oh, man, it'd be so interesting to play like a wrestling theme song trivia game with you, where it's like you only get the first like 2 or 3 seconds of the song and see if you can guess. There's a few that are pretty iconic.
There's a few that stand out already where I'm like, okay, I know that one. But then there'd be a few where I'm like,
time to play the game.
Yeah, that's what I think. The interesting game.
Yeah. But I mean, even when you hear that one particular drum beat that goes off, and you know it's one of the Hardy Boys.
Yeah, no, it'd be fun. I actually, yeah. But wrestling was, again, another, like, I would argue, an influence on me and my performance. Because, again, if you just sit there and you put it on mute when somebody's walking to the ring, you understand everything about that character on their way to the ring. And I mean, this is more of your top tier guys, because not everyone can do it. But you can see, like, that's how an arrogant person walks. That's how an angry person walks. That's how a scared person walks. Like, you see it as they make it to the ring. And if you can influence that into, like, or not influence, if you can take that into your own body, then that's already half the work done. Like, the way you move through the world will tell you how your character is supposed to act. So for me, wrestling has always been, I shouldn't say always because I didn't catch on to it till later, but wrestling has been a big influence on a lot of choices I make as a performer.
How many times did you and I beat each other up in my basement?
Oh, lots. Lots of
pretending to be different wrestlers.
I love wrestling. I used to put people in so many different holes all the time.
back when we had no idea what we were doing and like how injured we could get.
Oh yeah, no, I put way too many ankle locks on people. That was a terrible thing for me to do to people.
Yeah, pulling too hard on a camel clutch.
What was that? The Walls of Jericho.
But you're right though. They portray larger than life characters more often than not, right? And that's the idea is you want to understand that character kind of right out the gate.
Yeah. And again, whatever it is, right? Like if watching Friends and seeing Phoebe influences your choices as an actor, then watch Phoebe. Like understand who Phoebe is and then bring that stuff in if that's what helps you. Because here's a little like acting secret. Your Phoebe will not be anything like Phoebe. Like if you're going for an impression, maybe, but if you're just taking who Phoebe is, like the essence of Phoebe, your Phoebe's gonna be different from my Phoebe, going to be different from his or her Phoebe. It's just gonna be
yeah. Your Phoebe might come off more like a Will and Grace.
Yeah, probably. It's all just relative to yourself and what influences you, what makes you passionate, what gets you excited is very important too.
And once again, I'm going to piggyback off that real quick. Is if I tried to replicate an animation sequence of Glenn Keane's, it's going to come out as more of a study than it is a replication of the animation because you're going to be really focused on how he drew those frames and like what pencil strokes he used to get there. How did he portray that energy? It would be a really good exercise because you'd come out understanding more about how he did that, but you're going to do a side by side and they're not going to be the same, not even close. Then you can take that, what you've learned from that, and then you can apply it elsewhere. Right? It's like the evolution of the Atano circus technique over time. It started in Macross, I think in Macross, and then it's slowly evolved to its own thing, and now it's used everywhere. Like I was saying Invincible earlier, it's using Gundam all the time, right? Giant robot space battles. Even in Eureka 7, it's used all the time. Surfing robots for the win.
One thing I enjoy as a spectator is I love those you probably don't see this because it's on Instagram, but they do this Instagram thing where an artist will draw a picture of something and then say next to it, like, draw this picture in your style.
You know, I've seen those. Yeah. I've seen those challenges before.
I love those.
Yeah.
Those are fantastic because I love to see how people take the same essence of that character and draw it in a different way.
Yeah, it's a really, really good just character design technique in general. Steven Silver, who is the designer of Kim Possible and like a few other Disney cartoons and is an excellent character designer, does rock and roll life drawing, teaches online. Steven Silver, he's wonderful. But one of his things with character design is to take the prompts, the character prompts, at face value, right? Like, read what they are, and then draw it, and then draw it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, but different each time. How can you take those things and build the best character out of those prompts, keeping the essence of the character, so all of the prompts still have to be in the character, but then learning how to develop the character from there.
Yeah.
And it's the same you were saying with the glasses, like if what a character wears with the glasses. Do they fidget with their glasses? Do they bite on their glasses when they're nervous? And,
yeah.
You know,
it just gives you something to play with and it's something for you to understand because it will teach you things about your character that you didn't know until you got it, right? And it can completely change your entire understanding of who this person is once you start to explore things in a different way like that. I want to say, for the sake of being influenced and getting influenced, I would recommend that you expose yourself to as many genres, as many actors, as many movies, TV shows as you possibly can to sort of get an understanding of what you like and what you want to see and who you want to be. Again, as I said earlier, just because I want to be Chris Farley doesn't mean my Chris Farley will be Chris Farley. It's still going to be me, but what about that person and the way that they work and the way that they present themselves do I gravitate to? And what do I want to replicate in that gravitation for myself so I can feel confident in what I'm doing and I can get across what I want to get across about who I am as a performer.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Is even from an art and animation perspective, and I think this is true for
100%,
acting too.
100%
It's
for
just get out there. Get out there. Go see stuff. Go do stuff. expose yourself to as much as possible, because you don't know where your influence is going to come from, right? Like you could go do something so mundane. You could be sitting on a park bench and somebody walks by and does something super weird or super cool. And you're like, yep, that's cool. That's inspiring me to do this or that. You could be sitting on the bus for all you know. Just get out there. Expose yourself to as much as you can and see what comes your way and what's going to influence you. If you've never been to an art gallery before, maybe go to an art gallery. Check it out. See what it's all about. You know, it's not a bunch of people standing around sipping wine. I mean, that's part of it at certain exhibitions. But if you're just going to go on a random Saturday afternoon, it's not going to be that.
And I mean, when you go to acting school and colleges and stuff, one of the things that they're going to make you do is they're going to make you go out into the public, sit somewhere, go grocery shopping, whatever, and they want you to people watch. They want you to watch how people move through the world, and then they're going to want you to copy it and bring it back to class. Even if, like, let's say that you're just turned off by anime, I can almost guarantee you there's going to be an anime that you enjoy. Like, at least just the art style of it, not so much like the story and like the pacing and stuff, but like just the way characters are drawn and the way that they do their action scenes. I can guarantee you that if you don't like anime as a whole, you're going to find one that you're just like, oh yeah, this shot or the way that this person does this special move, I really like that. And that can influence you to take that aspect of something you don't like and put it into something you do like. And that will make you happier with your stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a big fan of He-Man, but I love Skeletor.
Yeah, there you go. Prime example. Skeletor's a great thing to take from He-Man.
So the big takeaway, I think, from this is to get yourself out there. Go out, see what influences you. If you know what influences you, it's still a good idea to get out there, because there's going to be things that pop up from all over the place. There should never just be one particular thing that influences you. You should have influences from many different sources.
Whatever sparks that imagination, embrace it. Embrace whatever sparks your imagination.
Absolutely. Embrace your imagination. I'm going to leave it there. All right, that's going to do it for the Frames for Thought podcast for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
The Frames for Thought podcast uses royalty-free music from Track Tribe and RKVC. Thanks for listening.